the reason to look into how much you can recoup on your vendor central account is obviously these days, if you're trading in the US, tariffs are creating an increased pressure on your P&L for everyone. Number two, borrowing cash, whether it's private equity or any bank loans, got more expensive compared to, let's say, 5 years ago. So that's creating another pressure on the P&L as well. For the most, the inflation is happening, prices are going up, so demand might be slowing down in your category, which then is also creating a cash, perhaps strapped situation. And this activity has a positive P&L impact, but also a positive cash impact on your business, which is what most CFOs are looking for these days. And this is why I think these three reasons then resulting in a positive cash impact is why scrutinizing the vendor central account to extreme detail is beneficial these days and important these days.
Thank you all for joining yet another IntentWise webinars. And our goal here really has always been to bring industry practitioners, learn from them, firsthand. So thank you all for joining. Let me introduce you to today's presenter. Pete Beke is the founder of Hawkers Club. He's someone that spends a ton of time thinking about revenue recovery for vendors. While it has always been an important topic, it is even more important now given the macro conditions and the focus on profitability and so on and so forth. So we thought it's pertinent to have this session. So Pete, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and it's great to be here with you.
And then without any further ado, I'll have Pete, he's already sharing his screen. Everyone's aware of the topic. I'll have Pete jump right in. So over to you, Pete.
Awesome. So as mentioned, vendor central receivables recovery is not a new topic, but there have been some important changes in the past, I'd say half a year to year, which is something that we thought would be good to educate everyone on that's involved in vendor central one way or another. And of course, we'll take any questions along the way. Let's jump right in. Number one that has been happening in multiple steps is that Amazon started to shorten the dispute deadlines for most disputes. Audit claims, I'm sure everyone's quite aware of them, that they are popping up left and right. As of April of this year, Amazon introduced a new rule that they must be disputed within 15 calendar days of posting. This is interesting because, one, they don't always enforce it, but we've seen instances where they decided to enforce it. So it is something that we highly encourage everyone to be aware of and take actions accordingly. Now, an important call out here is that the 15 days, that window doesn't start counting from when the audit claim is posted on Vendor Central, but when the audit claim sends the email notification to whoever subscribed on that Vendor Central account to those notifications, because not all audit claims make it to the Vendor Central side of things. Highly recommended to check the emails related to all financial claims, audit claims once a week to make sure that these are disputed within the 15-day window, just so that we reserve the right to escalate them later if we need to. The other big change on the shortened deadlines is that co-op agreements and all allowances. I bucket here the VIR, GMM, SVS, AVS, subscribe and save agreements if they are percentage of net receipt based. Now we have 1 calendar month to raise any disputes if we don't agree with the contents of the invoices that Amazon send the vendors. And once again, this is right now more of a guidance. In most cases, Amazon doesn't enforce it yet, but we've seen instances where they've rejected a dispute outside of the 1 month window for allowances. So once again, it is very important to dispute them, and it's not to recover. This is disputing to preserve the right for later recoveries, if it makes sense. So if the first dispute is done within 15 days for audit claims, 1 calendar month for allowances, later on Amazon will allow you to dispute them again, and then sort of this initial rule doesn't apply anymore as long as the first dispute is done on time. As we then talk about co-op and allowances, Amazon started to make an accounting change. The first clients where we witnessed it was June of 24, and they rolled it out, and as of April 2025, I believe all Vendor Central accounts have the new system, which is all allowances, so all agreements that's a percentage of net receipts. They used to be billed based on however many units Amazon believed to have received from the vendor. There was a gap between that figure and however many units Amazon paid to the vendor, which then created what we all know as overbilling. Now they closed that gap, because now they are deducting these allowances after payment or in line with payment. And that resolved 98, 99% of the problems. There's still a bit of discrepancy, but for the most, it's rather accurate. However, what I would like to highlight is that number one, they have not cleared up any pre-June 2024 data. So if you have a Vendor Central account, your clients have a Vendor Central account that have not cleared up that period, that's only going to be cleared up if you clear it up. Amazon's not going to sort of realign it for you. So there still could be discrepancies. And the statute of limitations is 24 months, is rolling 24. So the window is closing how long you've got to dispute the sort of old style overbilling, if you like.
And Pete, just quick reiteration, like the date where this change happened is June 2024.
That's when we first noticed it, and then Amazon rolled it out progressively to all Vendor Central accounts. So some of them got it in August, some of them in October, November. The last ones where we saw it was April of this year, and now we believe all accounts are under the new co-op billing. So the previous one still needs clearing up, and for the new ones, the 30-day dispute window comes in effect. And I still highly encourage everyone to verify them because we still find discrepancies nowhere near as significant as it used to be. But we are talking about, a few cuts here and there. And I don't believe that they are intentional. I believe those are more like something fell through the cracks. But that's still obviously money to be claimed. And so we still believe that a few things can be adjusted if we audit for them and then reconcile them once every month properly. Then if we transition from the allowances onto shortages, which is, I think, everyone's favorite topic when it comes to, how to get a bit more money from Amazon. Once again, last year, it was end of Q3, early Q4, when Amazon rolled out the redispute tool in the US. In Europe, some countries, as of now, have it rolled out, like Spain, Italy, and Germany. Smaller European countries like the Netherlands, Poland, don't have it rolled out for all accounts yet, but it's coming. So what this is as the sort of old way of disputing aged shortages, which is set up a ticket, try to keep the ticket alive for anywhere between 6 to 9 months, and then eventually Amazon's going to settle for an amount. That approach is going away, and Amazon intended the shortage redispute to roll out as the replacement of the ticket system for age shortage disputes. To the extent that as of early this month, they actually started closing down tickets and saying, look, we are not going to make a settlement offer for you, just use the redispute tool instead. So if anyone has open shortages tickets, try to close them out as soon as possible, because in our experience, that's going away very, very quickly. And get used to and get familiar with, get comfortable with, and get used to the shortage redispute tool. Which works the following way. So it's exactly the same place where you dispute your shortages to begin with as they come up. But the redispute by definition is the second dispute and onwards. So you disputed the first time when you noticed there's a shortage on the invoice. If Amazon approves it all, then you're good. If not, that's when you would transition into shortage redisputes. And that is something you can do as many times as you see fit. Now, initially, we did it, and I bet all people decided to do the logical thing, which is dispute them in batches, as in 10, 15 invoices at a time. And what we noticed is that if just one of the invoices are rejected, then the entire batch of submission is also rejected. Therefore, it would have been, of course, a great time saver. I highly encourage everyone to do it one invoice at a time, one submission at a time, to make sure that if one of them gets rejected, then we sort of save the rest 9 or rest 14. And you don't face total rejection on those. The second thing to note is, in order to get shortage redisputes, you first must dispute the invoice to begin with. So if you're not disputing your invoices when you see a shortage, then I recommend you getting into the habit of doing so. And we have done extensive research on this, and I can't tell you guys why, But if you submit the first dispute 41 calendar days after the invoice is overdue, that's when statistically, for the hundreds of clients where we tested it, you get the highest payout. I have no idea why it works that way, because you can dispute it like day one and day 120, 41 days seems to be the magic number. So, exactly. So and that's calendar days, not business days. So try to aim for 41 for the first dispute, and then once again, one at a time, cycle through them, and then you'll be good. What we have noticed is that it of course takes a significant manpower and resources for people to go through all of the disputes themselves, and this is why we have made it so that our current shortage dispute service is free of charge, entirely free of charge. So that's something to consider if any of your team feels like it's a bit overwhelming, because obviously if your vendor central account is getting a lot of POs every week, then it can get out of control very, very quickly. And out of shortages, if we transition into the packaging, I'm sure everyone's aware of SIOC, or shipping on container. That now is transformed, and now it's called, as of the 1st of January, called SIPP, or shipping product packaging. And I don't know why it needed a rebranding, but there we go. The important, however, is that it used to be a flat $1.99 for the US, and it used to be a flat charge for all other Amazon countries as well, which in my personal opinion was a rather good deal, because I think that was better to pay Amazon $1.99 than to SIOC certify your products. It usually worked out as a better deal for most products in most categories. What is important to note is two things. One, the calculation, how Amazon determines whether or not a product qualifies for SIPP, has changed. We'll talk about it in a minute. And they have introduced a new pricing structure, which is a tiered pricing structure as opposed to the flat one price. So the calculation is now based on shipping dimensional weight. So the weight of the product plays a role in the whole equation as well. Of course, there's still a quantity element to it as well, which is how many units we are selling of the product annually. And so number one thing I would review is, just because a product didn't used to incur SIOC charges pre-January of 2025, I would check if the product is incurring SIPP charges post-January 2025, because there's no guarantee just because it didn't used to, it's still not incurring. So that's check number one to do. And check number two, which tier my product falls into. And once again, do it for the whole catalog where you see SIPP charges, because some of them have gone down from $1.99 to $1.80. Obviously, that's a good deal if that's the case. But some of them might have gone up to $4 a unit. And that's of course double per unit what it used to be. And the sort of what I usually see is that vendors got comfortable with the SIOC charge of $1.99. They worked it into the P&L, and they said, yeah, it actually works. We allocated the $1.99 per unit to that. But especially for mid and low ASP products, I would actually do the ASIN level P&L to make sure that if it is the 4 per unit, it still makes sense. You can still sell it profitably. You can still spend on advertising, and to make sure the P&L works for you. Because once again, doubling from 2 to 4, it's sort of flew under the radar, but it can be a significant, especially if you're selling high units every single year.
A quick question, Pete, if you don't mind. Is the tiered pricing and the prices being applied also a point of contention, and hence you want to review? And is that something that you're seeing clients dispute as well, or there's not much leverage there? It is what it is. Like, how should a vendor think about what?
Good question. Yeah, good question. So you can dispute the charge itself with the appropriate certification, and how to SIOC or SIPP certify the product. For the most, that hasn't changed.
Okay.
There are third-party labs. Most vendors do it at the point of manufacturing, or whichever lab is closest to the point of manufacturing. That's, in my experience, tends to be the most cost-effective. As long as the lab is Amazon certified, you can't go wrong with any. In terms of the second part of your question, which is the tiering, I suggest thinking about it the same way how on the Seller Central side people think about the FBA fees. So that's the same tiered structure based on dimensional weight. Let's see which tier my product falls into. And then is there anything I can do to perhaps reduce the weight, reduce the packaging so that it falls in the one lower tier, occurring lower charges. So that's the way I would think about it. That is there anything I can do to the product configuration if I want to optimize it for SIPP in the same way how you would optimize a product for a lower FBA tier as well.
Right. So Nate has a question here. So are the SIPP chargebacks incurred if the product is not enrolled in SIPP?
Very good question. So what I would do, Nate, if I were you, is go to the operational dashboard and see if the ASIN you have in mind or the portfolio of ASINs you have in mind, have they been incurring SIPP charges post January 1 of this year? Because that's the best way of sort of seeing it. If Amazon started to charge you for it, that's when you know that charge is likely here to stay. And that's when you want to go down the optimization route of, do I want to certify my product? Do I want to optimize the configuration of the product? And we have actually seen products that didn't used to get any charges now get the $4 per unit charge. So it is important to highlight that just because a product didn't used to receive SIOC charges, it doesn't necessitate any status under SIPP. So think about it as a brand new program, and the qualification is brand new as well. So I would review the whole portfolio if I were in your case. I hope that answers your question. Now the last piece, which is I'm sure every Vendor Central user who looks into the finance part of it started to notice that the audit activity or audit claims have started to increase. That we have seen increasing for years starting 2022. So there's an important distinction that when we open the audit claim and the supporting or backup document of it, then we'll see a date of publishing the audit claim, which is when the FinOps analyst on Amazon side finished the review and they decided, okay, we are posting this claim. And that document is going to indicate which financial year the audit refers to, which can go back as far as 2022. So it still might be posted today, but related to 2022. And in this case, it is important to clear up that the 15-day response window or dispute window that I mentioned earlier, that applies to the posting of audit claim. So if it is posted today, it doesn't really matter which audit year it belongs to. I have 15 days from today. So that's number one. Number two, there are certain programs that in our experience, I don't want to say in 100% of the cases, but in very high percentage of the cases, result in audit claims. Those are subscribe and save. If your product is a CPG, a repurchasable product, you're likely using subscribe and save. And so I would look out for audit claims in that area. Number two, if you're using bulk buys or taking advantage of the bulk buys, that usually generates, once again, audit claims. Some are valid, some are invalid, but both subscribe and save and bulk buys, highly recommend to take the time, analyze it, and make sure that they are valid or invalid, and dispute them if they are judged to be invalid. We believe that this is a way how Amazon is sort of closing the gap between some inaccuracies that have been there in the past and audit claims. In our opinion, generally speaking, not just the subscribe and save and bulk buy, it's always good to dive deep, analyze and make sure that they are valid or invalid, because there can be a lot of money saved or paid out if they are not validated. There's a subtype of audit claims that internally we refer to them as H1, H2 audits. The sort of characteristics, how you can recognize them, is they are audit claims that refer to the allowances you have with Amazon. So freight allowance, damage allowance, base allowance, or co-op, SVS, AVS, GMM orders. And they appear as straight payments in your Vendor Central as opposed to an audit claim. So it's going to be hosted in a different section. But the title always says H1 of whichever year. However, for all intents and purposes, other than the location where they are hosted on Vendor Central, they are audit claims. on the agreements where Amazon is providing you services. And so these also, in our opinion, are worth validating. The reconciliation process and the audit process should be applied here as well. And if some of that or all of that is invalid, then the dispute. Now, as we look a bit into the future and short-term to mid-term future, what is it that we're expecting? I want to make it clear, this is nothing that Amazon said. This is simply in our experience, in our view, this is our expectation, especially in the US due to the sort of tariff conversations that are going on worldwide. Likely at some point there are going to be price increases if the tariffs are here to stay. So obviously that's a hypothetical scenario at this point. If that were to happen, what I would pay attention to is price claims and the increasing price claims, because what Amazon often does is they compare the products they receive in their FCs with different vendor codes from you, and they might claim a price overcharge by comparison. It's one of the audit claim types. So if you're increasing your wholesale prices, pay attention to price claims, because likely the automation is just going to increase those as well. We are seeing increased trading terms put on direct import procurement as well. Previously, except for the largest vendors, direct imports used to be sort of a free of trading terms type of supply chain route. We started to see sort of AVS, SVX agreements used to be charged on direct import as well for most cases. But now Amazon is often looking for freight allowance, freight compensation, damage allowance, damage compensation. So they are extending some of the domestically known agreements, let's say, or similar agreements to direct import as well. There is a point of negotiation during your AVM when you get there with your VM. It's just good to prepare for it. And if we get to a scenario where you're increasing your wholesale prices to Amazon, it is very important to know that the best wholesale increases tend to come from vendor retail increases with it, so that we make sure we don't squeeze Amazon's margins, that we are fair with them as well. And we've seen increased activity around product suppressions. When Amazon decides that they don't have the margin sufficient for them to continue carrying the product, they started blocking first the buy boxes, afterwards the procurement of the product entirely. And those are all margin squeeze related actions, which we can avoid if we make sure that the retail price of the product increases in line with the wholesale increase. So we sort of keep that increase fair, and we don't sort of squeeze Amazon's margins either. So those are the sort of top three expectations if the future plays out how we expect it to play out. And so to recap, what are the sort of top recommendations? Make sure someone from your team is subscribed to all email notifications coming from the FinOps side of Vendor Central. Act on them immediately, like monitor those emails once a week, allocate 15 minutes a week to it, just to make sure that you're reserving the right to recoup that money later on. Number two, the submission of dispute, and this is a strategy we use ourselves as well on behalf of our clients. Then an audit claim comes up, we just dispute it immediately. Not because we expect any recoveries, but because we want to reserve the right for the client to later on dispute it when we have the appropriate documentation and we have validated that audit claim. So simply disputing it buys you time. Later on, you can then present the data to Amazon where you believe the audit claim is valid and invalid. As I said, track notifications outside of Vendor Central, because not everything gets posted into Vendor Central, especially on audit claims. And make sure you pay close attention to your ASIN level P&L when we think about SIPP enrollments and SIPP charges. And pay a close attention to Amazon's P&L as well. If you increase wholesale prices, make sure it's a fair deal. You don't squeeze Amazon, because they started to increase the suppressions, both buy box and procurement suppressions, where they notice it. So those are the key takeaways, because the 4 points I'd like everyone to take away from today. And if there's any questions, then very, very happy to receive and answer them.
Awesome. Well, Pete, thank you so much. There's just a few questions that I want to just throw your way, Pete, while we wait to ask the questions. One is the tariffs and the constant ups and downs we have seen in the actual tariff math. How is that showing up in terms of your vendor recovery process? Is that resulting in many more claims? What really is happening because of that? Because I don't think
Mhm.
we've seen the end of those fluctuations yet.
Exactly. So there are a few points to break down your question. So once again, this is not Amazon's view, this is my personal opinion on the situation, that there's a very high uncertainty, and I don't think anyone knows how it's going to play out in the very end. Because of that, in my opinion, Amazon's being very cautious on accepting any price increases as it relates to wholesale price from vendors. I'm only aware of a couple from the largest brands in the space to have successfully got Amazon to accept price increases. Those brands received increased price claims and audit claims that later on are disputable, but they need to be validated and disputed. So that's answer number one to your question. The second part, and this started in February of this year when the incremental 25% was announced onto Chinese origin products, which is all vendors that utilize direct import programs that have the Incoterms FCA or FOB. Those are receiving additional charges because in FCA, FOB, Incoterm programs, Amazon is responsible for the tariffs, not the vendor. And so because the tariff itself has grown, Amazon's not going to let the wholesale go up, but they'll be charging the vendor back on agreements. Usually these are straight pays, but I've seen percentage of net receipt agreements put in as well. So they are charging the vendor back. In my experience, they need to be validated, but for the most, they are accurate because they bill after the POs that tends to line up with what they actually pay the vendors for. However, the validation there is still important.
And they show up as deductions, I assume?
Correct. So they show up as straight payments under the hamburger menu payments co-op.
I see.
Is where you would see the invoices.
This is a question from James Wakefield. The question is regarding the redispute process. How does this affect historic changes, like, for example, historic shortages, for example, pre-2022 that have not yet had a dispute filed?
Firstly, shortages can be disputed up to rolling 36 months. So with the pre-2022 dates, you'd be really pushing the 36-month window, and Amazon tends to exclude them from the consideration because of the statute of limitations. If these are within the statute of limitations, in this case, I would just submit the shortages ticket as you would, and then try to recover the amount that way. However, if the shortages tickets eventually will get taken away from us, even the ability to click on it, in that case, first they need to be disputed on the invoice, and then the disputes would need to be redisputed, and then the redisputes can appear next to the invoice. But also, if you open the current dispute, so the first dispute, the ticket itself, then you'll see the ability to redispute it. It needs to be done quickly after the case was closed. So the timing here is what you want to pay attention to.
Can you repeat again what the statute of limitations, that duration is?
So shortages, the general statute of limitations is a rolling 36 months.
Okay.
It used to be 5 years, and then Amazon cut it down to 3.
I guess, you already hit the strategic actions list in terms of what one should do about revenue recovery right away. Just based on all the work you're doing, can you give the audience a sense of the range of kind of revenue recovery amounts you've seen in terms of ballparks of like mins versus max, for people to understand why this is worth spending the time?
Sure. So the general ballpark is between 2 and 8% of your annual revenue is what's recoverable. It depends on how complex the account is. Complexity here is how many supply chain routes you use, how many vendor codes you have, how big is your ASIN portfolio, stuff like that. And then well-kept accounts tend to have around 2.5% that's recoverable. And then accounts that might not have had as much attention in the past few years, that's when we can get up to the 7-8% mark. And that average is across over $7 billion with a B retail revenue a year audited. So it's a quite significant portion.
Pete, any closing remarks, or are we good? I think we have touched on all the topics. And then
I think we touched on all of the topics. What I would reiterate is that the reason to look into how much you can recoup on your vendor central account is obviously these days, if you're trading in the US, tariffs are creating an increased pressure on your P&L for everyone. Number two, borrowing cash, whether it's private equity or any bank loans, got more expensive compared to, let's say, 5 years ago. So that's creating another pressure on the P&L as well. And for the most, the inflation is happening, prices are going up, so demand might be slowing down in your category, which then is also creating a cash sort of perhaps trapped situation. And this activity has a positive P&L impact, but also a positive cash impact on your business, which is what most CFOs are looking for these days. And this is why I think these three reasons then resulting in a positive cash impact is why sort of scrutinizing the vendor central account to extreme detail is beneficial these days and important these days.
Awesome. With that, we'll call this a wrap. Pete, thank you for joining, and we'll see you all in our next webinar.
Thank you for having me.